child, and what would have been your first encounters, whether they were as a child or as a teenager. What started you reading, even perhaps, or started you drawing?
Okay, so that's a psychiatric discussion in front of all these people.
Yes.
Okay. So what about my childhood? I started to draw when I was a kid, like everybody else, you know, like you're 5 or 6 years old, and it's just that I never stopped. That's the difference between the actual illustrators and people doing something else in their life, I would say. So I've always been what I would call a storyteller, and as soon as I could hold the pen, I was drawing stories and writing stories and illustrating them. So my first comic page, I drew it when I was 6 years old, and my first comic book when I was 8. And it's not published, no. But I was reading the comics at my grandpa's house, in fact. So it was the classical French humoristic stuff, in fact, yes.
And is there a point where you started reading something different from that, or where you started developing tastes for things that you were seeking out on your own, apart from?
I was reading novels a lot when I was a kid, so maybe it was useful for my imagination too. But for comic books, I don't know if maybe people know Régis Loisel and Peter Pan. There is a comic book, a series. So it just dropped in my hands when I was 11 years old at school, and I think this is what changed my world, in fact, yes.
And now, is there a point when you maybe started drawing, and a lot of people have a point where they're reading comics before they're drawing comics, and that there's this key work that makes them decide that this is what they want to do, where you realize that this isn't something that is just fun as a child, where it might have a potential professionally.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a point? When is that point for you?
Well, I would say that's different for me because, as I said, I've always been a storyteller, and I've always been drawing comics and drawing whatever. So for me, profession, it was we have to study for that, and it's gonna be hard, and it's not gonna be fun, and it's gonna be painful, and it's gonna be the rest of our life like that.
Right.
So for me, I was just drawing comics for all my childhood and teenage years, and when I was 17 years old, I was like, hey, wait, that could be my job. You mean I could do that, and it would be fun and not painful, and I would be paid for it? Okay, let's try. So basically, this is how it happened.
And did you follow a course of education specifically aimed at comics, or is it general arts education?
I was in a art school between 15 and 18 years old about design and communication, visual communication, stuff like that. And so I had this big revelation when I was 17 years old, finally, like, hey, I could do that. So this is how I moved to Brussels, and I went to a comic school there, yeah, for 3 years. But I was already, drawing comics all the time, instead of doing my homework. Don't do that, yeah.
And so, your first work that we've seen is your first, also, I think your first work published by a major house in France. You didn't have any works published before that other than fanzines, is that?
Well, I joined a few fanzine groups, and yeah, but that was not a big deal. Yeah.
And what, from the point where you do this 3-year program in France for comics education, how
in Brussels.
In Brussels. How long between finishing that and publishing your first book?
Well, I started the Brew when I was 19 years old, so hey, maybe you can just, hey,
oh, yes. We have some slides here.
We have a few things. So when I was 19 years old, I drew that for a contest that was for a comic festival in Paris. And so the topic was being 15 years old. So we had to draw a page about this topic, and this is what came out. And I won the contest, so I was, like 19 years old and fresh and confident, like, oh my god. And so I started to draw and to write and to draw the story of that the very same summer. And so yeah, so this is how I started that.
Process work.
Yeah, neurotic.
Yeah, you
Process
want
work.
to take us through a little bit the creation of your work. Like, what are the steps?
First I write like that because I have all these visions and images, and it's like cinema. In fact, everything is moving and everybody is talking, so it's a bit schizophrenic. You say that?
Schizophrenic,
okay.
Yeah.
And so I have to put it on the paper instead of going to the hospital. And sometimes I draw the spaces like that, so I can move myself, in it, and move the characters in it. And so after all that is done, basically, next one, I start to draw a few sketches again. And so first there is sketches like that, and then with the light table I do a better drawing, and then there is the color, and then the lettering. So it's always like that, like writing, sketching, drawing, coloring, lettering.
And at what stage do other people besides you first see the work? Are people seeing the script, or are they not seeing anything until you've started to draw?
Well, it's all about trust. So, so a few friends.
Let's say someone you trust.
Yes, someone I really trust. No, of course I show it. I have to show it because you are all alone in your work, and you can't step back, from it all the time when it's really needed. So. I had to show it when, as I said, I started the definitive version of the blue when I was 19 years old, and it took me 5 years. So of course I had my friends and teachers looking at it for a while. Yes.